friends, and welcome to another episode of your Bish Therapist podcast. Today, I'm covering Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. And if you don't know what that is, maybe you are living in a different country or a cave. I actually don't know. Maybe people are getting this show in caves because it has been so popular. Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is a new reality show on Hulu. Today, I'm going to cover the first episode of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. And for people who maybe aren't able to watch or haven't watched, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a synopsis. I'm going to talk about the key players of the show, the cast. I'm going to talk a little bit about their backgrounds because one of the interesting things about this show, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, again on Hulu, and this is not an advertisement, I'm just telling people where to watch it so they can follow along, but is that the first episode of the show, I could probably do a 4-hour podcast just on episode 1. And then the other episodes are different than episode 1. And between episode 1 and episode 2, there elapses almost a year, I think 11 months. And so I find this show so fascinating so I wasn't going to cover it. And then, I don't like doing trendy stuff that's super popular. And so when this hit the scene and people were raving about it, I was like, I don't know. So I went to a doctor's appointment and I had one of my doctors beg me to cover it, which I was like, that's so cute. So I was like, okay, I guess I need to. What I told myself is I'm never going to cover something that doesn't authentically feel right for me or I don't feel authentically enthusiastic about. And so I had just heard, you know how that is when like you haven't seen something and then there's memes and then there's all this stuff and I just kind of was like out of the loop. And so what I decided to do was watch one episode, season 1, episode 1 of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. And I was hooked and I was like, oh, cool. I could do a 4-hour podcast about this. Neat. And then there's just so many fascinating parts to Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, which now I understand why people really wanted me to cover it. There's, religion and gender roles, mental health, and, societal norms and mores and, faux pseudo-friendships and mean girl. I mean, it's so ripe for clinical interpretation that, quite frankly, I would be a fool if I didn't cover this, because for me, this is really my Super Bowl. I mean, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives gives me stuff that I don't get from regular housewives, truly. Every week of the podcast, I will be releasing one new episode about Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. I'm going to authentically categorize them in ways that make sense. So, maybe I'll group episodes 2 to 3, 4, I don't know. But I also am going to be doing a really exciting collab with Amy Phillips about Secret Lives of Mormon Wives in a couple weeks. So please stay tuned for that. But you all will be getting a new episode every week about Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. But don't worry, I am not forgetting about Housewives. I'm not forgetting about Bravo. I'm not forgetting about any of that. It's just so much fodder for me. For those of you who haven't watched it, today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a synopsis. Many people listening to this maybe did watch it, but some didn't. And so I don't want people to be lost. So not only am I'm going to give a synopsis about the show, but I'm going to be talking about some key points. So for people who have heard about Mom Talk, but like me, you had no idea what it was. What was the scandal? What was the drama? What was the backlash? Who are these people? Who are the cast members? Why do they all look exactly alike? So today is going to be, I'm laying the groundwork and then I'm going to start covering, each and every single episode of this. And by the way, as of this taping, I'm recording this. I've only watched up to the 3rd episode of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, because the thing about me is I like to go in fresh. I like to go in without any influence from other people, right? Because there were memes all over the internet and I just stayed away from them because I wanted to try to give myself as much. I don't like to taint my thoughts with public opinion and what other people are saying. My favorite thing to do is to go in and watch a show that's really popular and just use my intuition, use my clinical skill set, see where I go, how I feel with these people, and go from there. One thing I wanted to make sure to do today is I'm going to list the cast, who they're married to, how many kids they have, and then also some of their backstory. Because the one interesting thing for me about this was that the first episode, they were just like, here are all these people. They all look identical, which, by the way, this is how I felt when we watched Salt Lake City for the first time. I could not tell Meredith and Lisa apart. I could not. And now that seems insane because we know them and it's like, oh, of course, they're so different. But when you don't know people and you have a group of 8 women who their goal is to have the same beauty standards and norms, well, that's going to create a lot of confusion, which it has. I literally made a chart. I posted it on my Instagram, Your Bish Therapist. I use sticky notes, and here's what I'm saying. Buckle up, because I'm prepared. Okay. So let's get into synopsis. Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is a reality TV series on Hulu that follows the lives of 8 Mormon mothers and wives in Provo, Utah. The show focuses on the women's personal and professional lives, including their involvement in the lucrative, quote, mom talk, unquote, community. The show's first season was released on September 6, 2024. So there is only one season of the show. There is 8 episodes, and it's, like I said, it's just gotten really, really popular. So here are some important things to note about the show. We're going to be talking about, again, there are so many components to this. There's generational trauma, family dynamics, church culture, societal norms and mores in Utah. Like there's layer after layer after layer. And so what I will tell you is that I'm going to do so many episodes on this, is that if I don't get to something, I'll get to it in another episode. Or if I misspeak on something, which, listen, I may, I will go back to that. And, the other thing that I'm going to say before I talk about Mom Talk community is I'm going to be honest in terms of my own bias and my own perspectives. So I was raised Catholic, no longer participate in that religion after all the abuse from the church was found out. And I just could not support that. It felt uncomfortable for me. So I walked away from that religious base. And right now, what I would say is I am spiritual, but not religious. I do want to be mindful that I am not here to step on any toes in terms of, talking about Mormonism in a negative light, or, I respect whatever religion or what not religion, if people are atheist, agnostic, whatever you choose to practice or don't, I respect that 1,000%. And so I just want to say that going in is that I, like everybody else, have my own perspectives and I see the world through my lenses, which, shade my perspective. So I just, A, want to be honest about that. But B, I just want to be really respectful with how I move ahead with this because, religion and faith is so special to people. And so we have to talk about how this religion impacts these behaviors. But again, I want to do it in a respectful manner. So here we go. The Mom Talk community. The women are members of a pseudo-friendship. That's what it said online, by the way, a pseudo-friendship, which is very Mean Girl-esque, but it is accurate, right? Frenemies, pseudo-friendship, whatever you want to call it. So they're members of a pseudo-friendship and business partnership where they appear in each other's social media content. The community gained traction after Taylor Frankie Paul, the undisputed leader of the group, revealed that the husbands and wives were involved in quote-unquote soft swinging. So the scandal shakes the women's sisterhood, putting their faith, friendship, and reputations on the line. And the drama comes in so the show starts featuring, after the first episode, you really start to see this split between the group, between, the clique, I guess I would call it a clique, of the sinners versus the saints. And so there's lots of fighting. There's lots of, the sinners versus the saints, and the saints have been compared to the plastics, which if you've never watched Mean Girls, why haven't you? Please go do that now. Mean Girls is an excellent movie, but it's also based on a book written by someone who specializes in the field about like these relationships, these queen bee, mean girl type dynamics. So Mean Girls is based on this book, who is written by someone who's amazing. And of course, I can't remember any of the names right now, but you could Google it or check it out, look on the internet and find that. So this show really does have it all in terms of, all these issues. So the women also deal with physical and emotional abuse, and some are open about plastic surgery, Botox, and ketamine therapy. So I haven't gotten to that part yet, but I have done an episode about ketamine therapy, and I talked about with VPR, with Vanderpump Rules, specifically how, some cautionary tales and some ways that it's been really effective and how it can go very wrong. And then the backlash of the show is that, of course, some members of the LDS faith have criticized the show, claiming it doesn't properly represent their religion. So here's the thing. We're talking about Mormonism here, right? So Mormonism is also known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Again, faith is a beautiful thing, but what humans do with it is another story. How is the religion interpreted and applied? And so in Mormonism, it's not a uniform theology. Okay, so what that means is there are several different groups within the faith. There are some groups. So, I talk about in my practice, I talk about everything on a spectrum. Okay, that's how I look at everything from narcissism to, personality disorders. Where do they fall on the spectrum? And so you're always going to have extremes. And I would argue that extremes are rarely healthy, but I say rarely because, again, it would be extreme of me to say never, because there may be situations where they can be healthy. But so my point here is that on one extreme side, you have Mormon fundamentalists who still practice polygamy, which the Utah-based LDS church banned in 1890, right? So it's like, okay, so we banned this, but there are still some fundamental folks on one extreme who still practice this, and they say, well, we don't care what you say now. This is what we believe and this is what we're doing. And then you also have liberal Mormons, also known as progressive Mormons, who take an interpretive approach to LDS teachings and scripture. And so, and I guess you would kind of call that Jack Mormon. So Jack Mormon is if you're inactive in the church or not adhering strictly to Mormon tenets. And then there's a term called TBM, which stands for True Believing Mormon or True Blue Member. Usually, I'm just including this because I did a lot of research about this. And so this is a pejorative term. So I'm not saying it negatively, but it's a pejorative term. It just means that people who practice this are all in with Mormonism and do not give space for questions or doubts. And when you have a religion, people are going to take the bits and pieces that they want to take to justify whatever their desires and needs are. Okay. So my point is that because Mormonism is not a uniform theology, it leaves lots of room for interpretation. Okay. And so why is this important? Because let's go back to Mom Talk for a second, so Mom Talk was founded by Taylor Frankie Paul, Whitney, Macy, and Michaela. Okay. They were the 4 OG members. And Taylor Frankie Paul said, when she was asked, why did you start Mom Talk? And she said, and I quote, to stick it to the patriarchy, she said, quote, fuck this, and started Mom Talk, which I just loved every second of that. I was like, yes, I love that. Because so the thing is, Mormonism is inherently patriarchal, inherently. But what Taylor and some of these other women were trying to do, well, so they say, was they wanted a platform for the new generation of Mormon women who are trying to change the stigma of gender roles in the Mormon church. And I just thought, amazing. Yay. Great. Because again, in an inherently patriarchal religious context, there are certainly ways within Mormonism where women are treated very differently. They're held to different, rules and standards. And so what I love about this new generation of Mormon moms who started Mom Talk, it's just, I love just trying to break the stigma, right? Because it's like, for me, I think religion and faith can be beautiful, but not when weaponized and used as an excuse to hate other people or people who are different, okay? Or people who aren't even different, just like not your cup of tea, whatever it is, okay? So I love personally the foundation of these women saying, okay, so we are Mormons, we enjoy Mormonism, we feel that there's good tenets here, there's good roots to this, but we don't like the inherent patriarchal nature of this. And I just admire that a lot. Now, they also have a Mom Talk creator house, which that just goes to show you how much money they're making. Because here's the thing. So now apparently I'm a creator. I'm a podcaster. I'm a creator. I still don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it. And what I can say is it's very hard to make good money. And so these women are clearly making good money so that they can all afford an extra house, like to do your content in. Which, okay, so for me, people are like, well, why do you do content in your car? And I'm like, well, I have 1 million doctor's appointments, pretty much something every single day. And so I have to make my content where I have time to make it. There's no special house. I don't have like my content car. I just, I'm a regular person just doing it. And so the reason I bring this up is it just shows you that they really were crushing it financially and making lots of money. And so this scandal put their, it really put their ability to make money and support their families at risk, which they all kind of talked a little bit about how despite, this is what is so hypocritical to me and why I will always call it hypocritical behavior here. It's like, so with Mormonism, I'm going to talk about some of the rules and expectations, but with Mormonism, it's patriarchal. The men, they kind of like, are the breadwinners and, women are supposed to like have children and blah, 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 and all these other things, take care of the house. But there was the scene where they're talking at the creator house and they were like, who here is the breadwinner for their family? And it was all of the women. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. It's like, again, I don't like a message within religion that it's like somehow women are less than, but then look at all these women who are clearly like the breadwinners of their family and working hard and earning money. And so what have you. So the drama comes in with the Mom Talk sex scandal, which is Taylor confirmed soft swinging, which she described as orgies. So soft swinging means swapping partners in front of each other, engaging in everything but penetrative sex. And everyone in the room is together for the entire process. So there's definitely different ways to call things or say them, but Taylor said it was kind of more like an orgy. And so that's the word that I'll use. And so after this scandal, essentially Taylor went on TikTok and admitted on her social media to having these swing parties. And then, so Whitney chimes in, she says, well, are we swingers or moms fighting the patriarchy? And I just thought, this is what frustrates me. I thought to myself, you're both. If you can be both. Okay. You can be both. In fact, a true act against the patriarchy would be not shaming people for whatever they feel is sexually appropriate for them. And here's what I'm going to say. As long as everyone in the situation is a consenting, fully participative adult, then just because Mormonism says this is wrong, it doesn't mean that it is. And so this is where I come in terms of like, I'm not here to disparage anybody's beliefs and I'm not here to tear Mormonism down. I'm just here to say sometimes with certain religions, there's a lot of rules that I think they have. It can just make people feel afraid to be who they are. And so there's a defense mechanism. It is called reaction formation. Now, what is reaction formation? It is, within the psychoanalytical theory, it is a defense mechanism wherein we may hold certain desires, wants, or needs that are secretive. And so because we deem those desires unacceptable, we will publicly rail against them. So, for example, very religious leaders in the past who have railed against being gay or using substances, and then you find them in a hotel having, gay sex and using substances. And so that is a good example of reaction formation where if we aren't allowed, if we're told that our wants, needs, and desires, especially sexually, are not appropriate, but we still have them because we're human and humans are inherently imperfect, then to me, all of these rules are it's a setup for failure. It is a setup for failure because not everyone is monogamous, number one, and not everybody is straight, number two. And so again, I'm just trying to move about this from a psychological perspective rather than, judge, but there are certain aspects to this that do have psychological underpinnings. Again, so for example, being a swinger is fighting the patriarchy because it says, well, these are the rules and we're going to go against this because, we don't believe that there's anything wrong with this. Again, as long as it's adults, consensual, respect, ethical, all of those things, and nobody's getting hurt, then it's just sex shaming. Let me talk a little bit about some of the other tenets of Mormonism, because I do think that it goes into some of the psychological defenses that these women have because of the shame and the guilt that they were made to feel growing up with this religion. So the rules or commandments of the Mormon faith, also known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, includes, A, the word of wisdom. The word of wisdom is a law of health that prohibits alcohol, coffee, tea, other than herbal tea and tobacco. So Latter-day Prophets also teach that Mormons should avoid illegal drugs and abusing legal drugs. So cut to, I forget what episode this was in, and I'm going to talk about this, but cut to the scene where Whitney and some of the other girls are getting Botox and they are inhaling laughing gas, and they talk about how they can get high, but still get around the rules. And so for me, that just personally bugs me when it comes to certain things, that it's like, if you set, as a society, as, whatever, if we set rules that are just, we're setting people up for failure, like people are going to do what they're going to take these little loopholes to try to get around the rule so they can engage in the behavior. And the fact is that people use substances. I mean, everything is a substance. And so coffee and alcohol, it's so interesting that to me, those things are prohibited. But Macy was laughing about how, apparently in the LDS church, like Botox and what's the word I'm looking for? Just self-improvement in terms of like beauty lab and laser, like that, none of that is seen as inappropriate. And so it's interesting to me, picking and choosing. So these women, by the way, they're, inhaling this laughing gas, and you can tell that they're enjoying it, which, like, great, mazel, enjoy yourself. If you're not an addict, do you. But then, the rationalizations and the loopholing and, that's the part where it gets into like a really sticky situation. And then what happens is psychologically, people are living with fear and shame and guilt because they have these desires, but then they're not behaving in ways that adhere to the rules. And so it just really can create a lot of issues. So with dress and grooming, women are expected to wear cosmetics that are neutral and conservative in color and style. They should bathe daily, use deodorant, wash their hair frequently. Perfume should not be overpowering or distracting. So again, the message here is women need to be soft. They need to be demure. They need to be mindful, blah, 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 blah. You all know I don't subscribe to that because I am the opposite of that. I am loud. I am not demure. I am assertive. And I just do not agree with women having to play the role of the more gentle sex. I just don't subscribe to that. So with dating, Mormons are taught not to date before they're 16, and church leaders have stated that prolonged and passionate kisses are off limits outside of marriage. So here, the expectations are for a woman to be pure and chaste. However, as soon as they get married, they are expected to be like porn stars. I think Layla said that. And the inconsistent and unreal expectations of women here are wild. So let's look at something. So there's going to be no sex education. We've already been super clear about that there's no sex education here. So lack of sex education and knowledge, and you add into that guilt and shame in a religious context, and that just equals, in my opinion, disaster most of the time. It's people who are uneducated about reproductive health and sexual health, but are expected to then be a whatever you want to call it for the husbands. So what I read online, it said, with Mormonism, do not engage in same-sex relationships. We are all taught that marriage is ordained between a man and a woman. We have great love and respect for all people, including gays and lesbians. There are many gay members of the church who are very faithful and are in full fellowship. They are welcome to come to church and participate in the church. We love them just as we would anybody else. We also believe the Bible's teachings that romantic relationships are ordained by God between a man and a woman, blah, blah, blah. Okay, again, this is the part that I can't. I can't with this. I can't with religion being used as a reason to perpetuate LGBTQIA plus exclusion. I personally can't do it. And so here's the thing. This is where we talk about how Mormonism is not a uniform theology. So I know that there are people within the Mormon community who do not believe in the nonsense that I just read you. Because here's the thing. It says, the person who wrote this, it says, they're welcome and, we love them just like we would anybody else, but they can't have the same rights as we do because they're different. And it's like, well, that's not loving them like you love anybody else. It's just not. So there are some parts of Mormonism where this is not one of the tenets, and there are some more conservative parts where this is. And that's just never something that I'm going to accept. This was part of Catholicism too. And I was like, well, if Catholicism means that, gay people are somehow bad, well, then I don't subscribe to this. That is so wild to me. I just can't. Sunday is the Sabbath. And Mormons observe the Sabbath and refrain from work when possible. Mormons pay a tithing, and a tithe is 1/10 part of something paid as a contribution to a religious organization or compulsory tax to the government. Mormons believe in giving back to their religious community. And so the tithing is part of them paying back into their community. Mormons are expected to live by moral standards, which, as we know, moral standards are vast. Not everybody is capable of being such like a moral, AKA perfect human. I just think some of these rules are setups, and then honesty, it says Mormons are expected to be honest and have integrity, which is just, here's the thing, just a good rule for life. But a lot of folks don't adhere to that. So, okay, let's go back to some of the Mormon rules. No sex before marriage and complete fidelity after marriage. And in the Bible it says, thou shalt not commit adultery, no alcohol or drugs. And when I was like, well, why? And it said, we don't want the effects of alcohol or drugs to influence us to make poor decisions. And again, there was a scene, and I'll get to it. I forget what episode it was in, where Whitney was talking to her mom about the sex toy brand deal that she would have gotten $20,000 for. And so here's the thing. While I appreciated Whitney having this conversation with her mom, and her mom made this comment about well, if we engage in too much pleasure, that can be dangerous. If we can't trust ourselves to make good decisions around substances and we need to just say, no, it can't be a part of our lives at all, well, that's sobriety. And so you can't force people into sobriety who aren't interested in sobriety. And that may not be the life for people, right? Like, not every person in Mormonism is interested in some of those rules. Donate 10% of your income. So that's called the tithing, which is a 1/10 part of something. Okay. So 10% of your income to charity and the building up of the kingdom of God. It says, we believe that God is the creator of the world. We obey the law of the tithe to show our trust in God. Because of the church's almost complete lay ministry, the tithes are only spent for good instead of lining the pockets of professional pastors. So like Joel Osteen, who has the mega church, and then he didn't let people come in when there was like a hurricane. That's the kind of stuff that it's like, okay, so how do you want to apply this, right? How do you want to apply this? Because this looks great, but how does it actually play out? I don't know. Another rule is do not view pornography. Here's what's interesting. It says, we believe it's incredibly belittling to women to treat them as objects, and pornography tempts the viewer to commit sin. And again, it's like, if you can't drink a cup of coffee or watch pornography, which, by the way, there's nothing wrong with watching pornography, as long as, again, it's adults, consensual. There's a lot of really dark stuff out there on the internet. So as long as no one's being hurt, it's consenting adults, everything is appropriate. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think that to say, well, you can't do this or you can't do that because you might lose your mind and just become like obsessed with it. Well, psychologically, research shows that if you tell people, like when they're young, if you tell kids, you can't do this, you can't do that, you should be afraid of this, be afraid of that, you'll lose control. They end up kind of losing control anyway, because what we have to teach ourselves and our children is not how to avoid dangerous things, it's how to use them appropriately or how to not use them, but giving them another solution instead of just don't do it. So there's a reason why, for example, abstinence doesn't work, because it is ignoring a couple of other huge components, which is somebody's will. Do they want to abstain from sex or do they not? So if we're teaching kids not to engage in sex, but they have no intention, then they're just not getting the education and they're going to do it anyway, and then it's going to get them in trouble. So this is kind of the general piece of what I'm saying with this, is that when we don't teach people how to have self-control, how to manage urges, desires, needs, if we don't teach people how to do that and we just instead say to them, well, just don't, that's a setup for failure. It just is. Like, from a psychological perspective, that's just a setup. Oh, foul language. We keep our language clean and respectful, as it says in the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain. I saw something the other day that describes me, and I just want to share it. It was a mug that said, I have the vocabulary of a well-educated sailor. And I was like, I need this because that is for me. I am extremely well-educated. I am informed. I am well-spoken, and I love a curse. I'll be talking to you all like this and then drop the F-bomb, and that's just how I speak. And again, it's learning when to use it, how to use it, how it's appropriate. Sometimes it just, the F word, it just puts a little sauce on the sandwich. It just puts a little extra sauce on it. And guess what? There's nothing wrong with that either. Taking the Lord's name in vain, totally respect that, but in terms of like just cursing and foul language, I say, for me, that this is authentically who I am. And so if I couldn't speak authentically who I was, I might have some skin issues too. Just saying. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. And with the no cigarettes, coffee, tea, or tobacco, is we believe life is a gift from God, and we do our best to keep our bodies healthy and clean. And so it's like our body is a temple, and so there's no tattoos. I think that tenet is great. Our bodies, we are a temple. People who are healthy sometimes take that for granted. And I definitely think we should be mindful about what we put into our bodies. It's just that some people are going to be interested in that. Some people aren't. And you can't just force millions of people to be like, yep, I'm into that. That's just not going to be for everybody. One of the girls, when I first started watching, in fairness, I didn't know they were all just looking like the same person. And so there were some early episodes that I was just like, I don't know who said this, but someone said it's expected to have kids by the time you're 21. And so it's like, and maybe that's just because here's the thing with Mormonism and like Utah is there's cultures within the culture. And so I had Dallin on from Salty Housewives podcast, and Dallin talked about living in Utah. There's culture within the culture within the culture. And so it's really like a sociological experiment, and Utah is totally different from other places, and Park City is different from Provo. And so it really is understanding not only the different cultures within Mormonism, the different cultures within Utah, and geographical cultures as well. I mean, my gosh, it's so fascinating. In psychology, there is something called locus of control, which refers to how much a person believes that they have control over events in their life. Internal locus of control means that someone believes their actions directly influence outcomes, while people who have external locus of control means they attribute their life events to external forces like luck, fate, or other people. So this includes religion, God, essentially believing that they have little personal control over their situation. Okay. So here are the key differences. People with an internal locus of control believe their choices and efforts significantly impact their life. They tend to take responsibility for their actions and outcomes, and they may be more proactive in pursuing goals and managing challenges. People with an external locus of control often attribute their success or failures to external factors like luck, fate, or other people's actions. They may feel less agency in their lives and may be more likely to blame others for their circumstances. Why is this important? Okay. Locus of control and religion, there's like a Venn diagram, and there's a huge part where they overlap, because having faith to me is one of the most beautiful things. I'm not religious, but I have a lot of faith. I'm extremely spiritual. I believe in, my spirit guides and angels and all that other stuff. However, for me, I have faith and I believe in all that, but I have an internal locus of control where I know that all I can control in life is myself. That is literally it. As I talked about on one of my last podcasts, is that I had to give up sense of control and have radical acceptance that I can only control me, how I think, feel, act, react, etc. If you are in a religious setting and your sense of agency, you're taking it away from yourself, that is going to have a lot of physiological reactions, anxiety, gut health, physical health, right? If you feel that you do not have control and you are in this perfectionistic setting, that is going to create a lot of problems. Okay, so now let me get to where I'm going to talk about each of the cast members, okay? Someone in the cast, one of the first episodes, said, we have a similar look based off of what's trending, okay? And it's like, sigh. For me, I was never one of those girls who I didn't care about what was trendy. I didn't care about how other girls looked. I cared about what worked for me. And that's rare, right? It is rare for people to want to, beat to their own drum or whatever that saying is. And I'm not saying that is necessarily the right way. I'm saying for me, I struggle with that desire to just fit in and look and talk and sound like everybody else. I just inherently feel allergic to that idea. And so I thought it was interesting too, coming from one of the women, because it's like, well, wouldn't you want to look unique or different or whatever? But it just goes to show some of the rules and mores in this particular group is that we need to all practice the same religion. We need to practice it similarly, and we need to look similar. And I just don't I think we're all unique and beautiful and different, and that's what makes the world a beautiful place. Taylor, Frankie Paul, and Dakota Mortensen, who the only thing I will say is that I saw that they broke up, and I thought, hallelujah, because one thing I can tell you is as soon as I saw this man on my TV, I was like, something ain't right, allegedly. So Taylor has a child with Dakota. She is divorced, and I believe she has one child with her ex. Taylor, Frankie Paul, founded Mom Talk, but she has really, we saw in this first episode, we see her really go through it. So we see the scandals, the stressors that lead to her arrest, which is, so she talked about the Mom Talk soft swinging. And the thing is when you are ready to tell your truth, but your truth also tells other people's truth, that is always going to cause a problem, because the people whose truth you're also putting out there, they may not be ready for that. It was not wrong for her to share her truth, but I think in sharing her truth, it did make other people feel vulnerable and exposed who weren't ready to share their truth. And so I think I talked about this on one of my other podcasts. That's the toughest thing of recovering from trauma. It's like when telling your truth means telling other people's truths too. And that's tough in family dynamics. That's tough in religious dynamics. That's tough in tons of dynamics. And so I think that she needed to do what she did for herself, but I also can see the perspective from some other folks who felt called out, or, that parts of their lives were shared without their consent. So after the swinging scandal, which, by the way, it doesn't need to be a scandal, but I understand why it is in the situation. She got divorced from her ex, and then she got immediately into a new relationship. She got pregnant, and then, trigger warning, she had a miscarriage. Then we see at the end of episode 1, her arrest. She got arrested for, I think it was like domestic violence, battery, again, trigger warning. And then all of a sudden you see in episode 2, it's like 11 months later, and she's pregnant with Dakota's child. And then we see that they break up. And so here's my point. Taylor has been through it. Okay. She has been through it, honey. And initially when I was watching this, I was like, oh, they're trying to make her the villain, but she's not the villain. She's the scapegoat. So the scapegoat is someone who, in a family dynamic or a system, a scapegoat is the person who gets blamed for talking about the behavior, right? So everyone in Mom Talk, there's scandals everywhere. There's Connor's affair or porn addiction, whatever it is. There's, everyone in this group has some stuff, but when someone wants to call it out and talk about it, it's easy to make that person the scapegoat or the black sheep of the group, right? Taylor does a great job of making herself look wild, but in reality, I have some theories as to why she is the way she is. And spoiler alert, it's her parents. I'm going to get into that in future. I want to talk about the rest of the cast now, but I am definitely going to get into that. And no, I don't think Taylor is the villain at all. And yes, I will tell you who I do think is the villain. So then we have Michaela Matthews, who is 24 and has 3 children with her husband, Jace, who she's been married to for 6 years. She's a mom of 3, and her husband prefers to stay out of the public eye, which I understand because so does mine. I had to post an anniversary picture with just myself because he didn't want to be in it. I'm like, you're so weird. Whatever. I understand it. This life is not for everybody. Sometimes I even feel like it's not for me. So I get it. So Michaela had her first child at 16. She is open with her followers on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube about everything from her favorite products to her journey with eczema, fun moments with her kids. Okay, so now this is where I'm going to get into Michaela. So Michaela has been struggling with chronic illness, unexplained and undiagnosed skin issues, gut issues, things like that. Okay, let me explain this here. Chronic illness, for sure, is linked to complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is also linked to having to live a lifetime of being a perfectionist, which she said that she had to do because her mom was a church leader and they were expected to be, and I quote, perfect. And the amount of times I've heard her say perfect, here's my theory, is that Michaela had to be perfect her whole life because appearances to people who are church leaders matters more than how someone's actually feeling or living. Unfortunately, that's just sometimes how it is. And I'm not saying that's the case for Michaela's mom. Michaela's mom might love her very much and, totally rail against this. I have no idea. But what I can tell you is the picture that I'm painting is of somebody who, because she had to be perfect, she has all of these skin and gut issues that are not able to be figured out because I believe they are linked to trauma and emotional stuffing, is essentially what I'm going to call it. We as humans, we can only stuff our emotions for so long before our body is going to send out super red light signals. And if we don't listen to those, then it's going to just literally shut down. Like a car, if you're driving it down the road and you ignore the check engine light, it's just going to stop working. And that is the same thing with our bodies. And for me, Michaela is the stereotypical person who, she had a child at 16. And when your mom is a church leader and you had to be perfect, I'm sure that wasn't easy on her. She stayed in this relationship with this person who, because he's private, who knows what kind of relationship they have. Are they happy? Is she miserable? Is she, is there abuse? Is there not abuse? And listen, since I haven't watched more than 3 episodes, we may see this. I'm just telling you what I see and what my concerns are for Michaela. And now here's the other thing that I want to say. The gut-brain connection is known as the brain-gut axis, is the two-way communication between the central nervous system and the digestive tract. This connection is complex and involves the enteric nervous system, ENS, the vagus nerve, and the gut microbiome. I promise I have a point with this, so just hear me out. The enteric nervous system is a network of over 100 million nerve cells in the digestive tract that controls digestion. It's sometimes called the second brain because it can control digestion independently of conscious awareness. The vagus nerve is a key part of the gut-brain connection, allowing gut microbiome to communicate with the brain. The gut microbiome can produce signaling that communicates with the brain, the liver, the immune system, and more. Now, here's what's really interesting, is that if the gut microbiome is out of balance, it can send the wrong signals to the body and the brain. This is called dysbiosis and has been linked to many health issues, including anxiety, depression, and inflammatory issues. Okay. Now, this serotonin, our gut produces 95% of our body's serotonin, which is the happy hormone and affects mood, sleep, and appetite. Okay. So why am I sharing all this? Well, is because I think, Michaela, this happens to a lot of women who are expected to be perfect, who, again, has a lot of circumstances behind the scenes. I believe her body is saying, you need to attend to me. And if you don't, we're going to have some more problems. And sometimes attending to our bodies means speaking our truth. Sometimes people break out in hives because they are not sharing their story. And our bodies, our body keeps the score. And so, by the way, I became aware that the person who wrote that book, there was some serious allegations and things like that. And so I'm just so disappointed. I'm tired of being disappointed. But anyway, the body does keep the score. So even though, I'm not going to be promoting him or that anymore, the book, the point is that our bodies are aware even when our subconscious wants to stuff and stuff and stuff. We have Layla Taylor, who's 23. She's the youngest of the group, and she's a single mom of 2. She just got divorced from Clayton Wessel, and she shares day in the life vlogs with her sons, is candid about taboo subjects like her plastic surgery journey, her love life, and Layla is Black. And so Layla, the important thing here is that she talked about within the Mormon religion, there's not a lot of Black people, especially women. And she said she feels like she sticks out like a sore thumb, which just makes me feel so sad, because it's like, I just hope that she's not fitting herself into a space that isn't meant for her just to try to fit in. And if she is doing that, I understand why she is, but I think she's really sweet and she's lovely and I just really enjoy her. And then we have Demi and Brett. So the interesting thing about Demi and Brett, Demi is 30, Brett is 46. Now, Brett was married to Angie H. from Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. Angie H. was on, I think it was last season, Angie Harrington, but she left because her son was diagnosed with autism and she wanted to focus more on her son, which, mazel. Demi is a self-proclaimed CEO of Cool Mom, has a following over 300,000 followers on TikTok, sharing her life with her husband, Brett, and their blended family. So Demi was previously married and divorced at age 24. She has 3 children with her current husband, including 2 stepsons from his previous relationship and 1 daughter from her previous relationship. Jen and Zach Affleck. So Jen is 25 and she and Zach have 2 children. And yes, Zach is a second cousin of Ben and Casey Affleck. And here's what I will say. The only person who I had a stronger reaction to than Dakota was Zach. I feel allergic. I feel itchy. I feel like I have to manage what I'm saying because, oh my gosh, I have so much to say about him. He rubs me the complete wrong way. All of my signals, the hairs, everything in my body says something ain't right here. Allegedly. Jen has over 1.4 million followers across TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. And there was a clip that I saw of a conversation between the couple where Zach expresses disapproval of the Mom Talk group. And Jennifer said, this group is really important to me, to which her husband replied, being divorced and taking care of 2 kids is going to be kind of tough. So you make the decision. And I just thought, well, Zach is the type of person that it doesn't matter who's watching. He's going to be who he is, his authentic douche self. And I am very interested to see how this goes. And now here's the thing. I will say there's been stuff in the media about Jen and Zach, and I haven't tuned into that. So I don't know what's going on. And I will, as I do more episodes, I will give more details and I will focus more. But this is just like my intro to this. Okay. Now, Macy and Jacob Neely. Macy has 1 child from a previous relationship and 1 child with her husband. Macy was a former tennis star at BYU, Brigham Young University. She's 29 and she traded in her racket for a pen, sharing her life story on her personal blog. She's the CEO of Baby Mama, a natal nutrition company, and the mom of 2 is open with her followers about life with her blended family, as well as she and her husband Jacob's journey expanding their family with IVF. So the interesting thing about Macy, and I don't understand why we didn't get a backstory on these ladies because it's super interesting. Her first husband died in a car accident tragically. So again, why is that important? Because it vastly informs the lens in which she's looking through. And it also helps me clinically look at, when I look at Macy, I see someone who's sweet, but I also see someone who's trying so hard to be happy and bubbly. And I don't think she feels that way inside. So that's a superpower that I have, just being able to kind of differentiate between what someone's presenting and how they're really feeling. And listen, I don't know how she's feeling. I'm not her. This is my best clinical interpretation. There's something with Macy that I just feel like there's pain there and she's trying to cover it up. She's so beautiful. She's so talented and she's just trying to cover up that pain. But I'd be more interested in hearing her story. Oh gosh. And then Whitney and Connor Levitt. Connor. Whitney. Whitney is a mom of 2, soon to be 3. So she is pregnant and she is due soon, I believe. She has been married to her husband, Connor, for 7 years. Now, what we saw, how Connor they talked about him having, quote unquote, a porn addiction. But then he was on Tinder and then the ladies were asking her questions about, well, Did he sleep with these people? Okay, here's the red flag for me. Okay. And this is going back to what I said about, the no pornography rule and all these other things. Okay. So clearly Connor has a hard time living up to his vows and the expectations within not only the Mormon religion, but just like a rule of being like a good partner. Okay. Also, he is a literal chameleon. And so that's not lost on me. The fact that he has a million different looks, I think there is clinical significance to that, but TBD on that. And what struck me most here with Whitney and Connor is that he had been doing whatever he was doing, which she wasn't clear about, nobody was clear about, for their entire marriage. So at the time that this was filmed, so they've been married 7 years. I don't know, maybe it was 5, but that blew my mind. So you are with a man who has been unfaithful, lying, breaking every bond and value that you value, and you get pregnant and are having another child with him, but are making Taylor the villain. So here's what I'm saying. I believe Whitney is the villain. She's angry at Connor for his behaviors, but instead of being angry with him, she's projecting all of her stuff onto Taylor, because if Taylor was the problem, well, that could be easily solved, right? If Taylor's the problem, that could be solved by just pushing her out of the group and having Mom Talk go on without her. But I have sad news for Whitney is that you are having a third child with this man and you're in. So Taylor isn't your problem. You and your husband are your problem, if I'm being honest. I don't like some of the things that Whitney has said. And, oh, by the way, Zach, going back to Jen and Zach Affleck for a second, Zach talked to 2 of the women and I didn't like the way he talked to them either. I was like, who are you to talk to any woman this way? Number one. And this is on a phone conversation that's being taped. So I can't imagine how he would talk to someone if it wasn't being recorded. But anyway, and so, here's the thing. Whitney's talking about it in this episode, in episode 1 or 2. And, for me, it's like the women are asking these questions and she's like, I don't know. And here's the problem. It's like a potential safety issue. So if you're not using protection because you want to have a child and your husband is engaging in extramarital relations, well, that puts your physical health and the health of your child potentially at risk. And so I'm hoping that they were able to talk about that, work that out. I hope they addressed it, because that is, not only is it a betrayal emotionally, and it can be a betrayal physically. But again, they were super vague about that. So, and then last but not least, we have Jessie, 32, and Jordan. It says she's the grandma of the group. She's 32 and she's the grandma. I'm like, oh my God, then what am I? The skeleton that sits in the corner at the age of 43? Come on, dude, that's crazy. But Jessie, she was divorced and remarried. She shares 3 children with her husband, Jordan, Jagger, Jovi, and then stepdaughter, Peyton. So stepdaughter is from Jordan's previous relationship. Jessie is a hairstylist. She owns a salon. She owns brands of products and a hair designer school. She shares lifestyle content and she shares a lot of her professional life on social media platforms. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. This episode has kind of been a good, let's lay the groundwork. Let's, figure out who these people are, what's going on, et cetera, et cetera. What my next episode is going to be is I've already talked about some parts of episodes 1 and 2, but next episode, I'm going to cover episodes 1 to 3. And then after that, I don't know. I'm going to plan it week by week and I'm going to see, what works best. But don't worry, I'm still going to bring you housewives. I'm going to be doing an amazing collab with Amy Phillips. I'm going to be doing a collab with Mandy Slutzker. So stay tuned for that. And I have lots more talking about Secret Lives of Mormon Wives to do. So this was just an introduction. My goodness, this is just going to be so much. But I hope that you all enjoyed this episode very much. I would appreciate if you could go over and give the podcast a 5-star review. One other request that I'm going to make is when you listen to the podcast wherever you listen to it, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Spreaker, whatever. When you go to look at Your Abish Therapist podcast, in the right-hand corner, there's a plus sign and it says follow. If you could follow the podcast, that would help me out a lot because then you automatically get downloads of the episode and, that helps my numbers out and stuff like that. So I would appreciate if you could do that. If not, no worries. And I just appreciate you all so very much. And I look forward to talking to you all about this again. And so for today, please take care of yourselves and each other, and ta-ta for now. Disclaimer: posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Abish Therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Greyheart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, or hear on YBT podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.